Lisa Su kicked off AMD Investor Day, and God, I like to sometimes, be critical of AMD, but I couldn't find much. I'll let you run with this one.
Yeah, so I have been attending their financial analyst days. I've probably been to 15 of them over the last 20 years. Part of it as an employee of AMD and part of it as an industry analyst. And what I really liked is the way that Lisa kicked it off, essentially saying, hey, that strategy we gave all of you in 2020, it's the same strategy, with some minor twists on how we execute it, right? In 2020, it was all about high performance computing, and they've somewhat modified it for adaptive computing, even though, you might be able to say, well, with GPUs, you had adaptive computing. Well, now with Xilinx, they truly have adaptive computing all the way down to reprogrammable hardware and high-end data center SoCs. Started off with some huge victory laps, data center, first exaflop, top 10 hyperscalers, PC, leaders in performance and battery life. But pointed out, Lisa said, hey, we're still underrepresented though. And that's really about revenue share, I think, related to commercial PCs. Gaming, right? Happy with our performance per watt. They have the broadest lineup of GPUs out there. But revenue, every financial metric you can think of, gross margins going from 43 to 48%, operating margin 12 to 25%, EPS from 64 cents to $2.79, FCF 300 million to 3.2 billion. And this is all in 3 years. So that's nice and dandy. But, well, what about the future? The biggest thing that Lisa talked about was the TAM increase. So in 2020, the TAM was 79 billion. When they connected with Xilinx, it was 135 billion. They came out with a rockin' $300 billion TAM, which is eerily similar to Intel's, right? And a lot of that increase came from the embedded automotive communications in the data center. Big growth in the data center. So this is the bullish that AMD is typically conservative, but this is the most bullish that I've ever heard the company. And I'll end with Lisa Su talking about what she called an ambitious long-term financial model. So now, first off, I'm going to say, one of the challenges was I didn't know what does long-term mean. There was a footnote called 1 and 2, but I didn't know what that means. And essentially, 20% CAGR over 57% gross margin, which is outstanding. Operating margin mid-30s and FCF margin over 25%. So just an absolute. Now, I want to end with some challenges that I think that AMD has to look at. First of all, while AMD was struggling for survival a decade ago, NVIDIA was building out CUDA and workload-specific libraries optimized for its hardware. The industry wants something like this from AMD, but how do they catch up? Do they need to catch up? What is the judo strategy that requires them not to necessarily catch up? I would say I would have liked to have seen AMD pair up with Intel, right, and have a software platform that the two companies can go at it against NVIDIA. And whether it's AMD adopting one API, whether it's the two coming together, I don't know if that's collusion, and they couldn't do that. Maybe open sourcing it to get out of the collusion part. Second risk for AMD, it's the first time the company has ever made an acquisition of this size. AMD has no experience at this. The only close thing was ATI. who on staff has the experience to make this work inside of the company. And the third one, and this is always a challenge when you have a company that's feast or famine, and that is the story of AMD over the last 30 years. Can AMD keep up the hunger? How many executives inside of AMD are sitting on $50 million in value of their stock? Some people continue to get super motivated about that, even when they're rich, like that, to that capacity, and some don't. Some, want to go fishing. Heck, when ex-AMD CEO Dirk Meyer left the company with $20 million, he never went back to work. He went fishing. So you just never know what the motivators are. But all in all, a very good event. And I have questions.
So after our event, I think fishing could be good. Although I expect that most highly motivated, successful people will probably fish for a week or two and then be like, all right, time to do something else. Because I think that's how people that are uber successful tend to be wired. But yes, occasionally you discover the fishing and you go, I think this is good enough. Tuning in yesterday, you did hit on a lot of the high points, and I appreciate that. With your history on AMD, I tend to allow you to go even further than normal in terms of our oxygen sucking tendencies on different topics, Pat. But probably the most interesting, provocative moment was when Lisa expressed that she's going to grow even at potentially cost of margin, meaning, the margins are very good, but she does see the opportunity and she wants to lean into growth. And she made a comment along the lines of they're going to pursue revenue opportunities that may not be as margin friendly. And part of getting to that 300 billion TAM is going to mean you're going to have to go after it. Yeah. And so that to me was one of the things that really stood out that she said. It sounds to me like she wants to turn the knob to 11 as it comes to top line growth. I think she's proven to the market that execution, getting the right products in market, will in fact enable the company to grow, to increase EPS. I mean, it's multiple besides the pullback in the market has come down because the earnings have grown. The actual earnings per share have grown. So the multiple has gotten less outsized in terms of the price. It's compared to how it was a year or two ago when I was looking at, 40, 80 times, depending on where we were in that market condition. I guess I'd say the only other thing that really caught my attention was, I think that the company's incredibly confident. I think they're at a point now where it's very confident in where they are, how they sit in the market. We're going to hear from Intel soon. There was announcements that came out from Intel this week about some hiring freezes. You didn't get any of that from Lisa yesterday. You didn't sense any pause, and so. That, to me, in the x86 world, is an incredibly bullish sentiment. Now, last thing I'll leave, and you did mention some concerns, Pat, is, ARM is probably got to be on her mind. There isn't really a play there. So Intel has the foundry business to potentially maximize ARM as it takes more market share. What really is AMD's play if ARM continues to gain strength in the, cloud scale, data center and some of these areas? Because of course there's the market as a whole expanding. I've said this for a long time. And then there's the opportunity to take market, which AMD has been doing somewhat effectively, but they can't take market from a product that's complete. It's going to be harder to take market from the ARM ecosystem, which seems to be ramping up. So that's kind of my big question walking away is, are they going to address that more? Is that something that's going to be in focus? Do you have any boomerangs, or can I
Yeah, just a quick boomerang. I went back and read the transcript that I took, and Lisa said they are ISA agnostic, and she mentioned also all of Xilinx's data center SoCs are ARM based.
Yeah.
So she went out of her way to say we're ISA agnostic, and to me that really left that door open that they could do that. Here's the thing, though, and I've reiterated this on many of our shows. There is nothing unique about an ISA, whether it's RISC-V, whether it's related to power and performance.
Yeah.
there is a big correlation. You have to look at the ecosystem of things you can connect to that ISA. And that's where ARM is really, really ramping up. Reality is there's only two x86 companies. That's Intel and AMD. There are thousands upon thousands of ARM folks in that ecosystem, and they have started to build out data center class things. And Lisa's very pragmatic. I mean, if she can get a boost out of going into ARM, she's going to do that. In fact, years ago, was it a decade ago, they did have a strategy that had ARM server CPUs, and then they bridged all the I/O with their own stuff. So yeah, stay tuned. That's the boomerang.
Good ad there. I didn't necessarily cover the Xilinx part, which, by the way, is a huge deal and obviously warrants additional consideration, as that did add a diversification play to that company. So good stuff there. I did look back at my quote. Lisa, it was clear that revenue will expand faster than margin. That was the note I took away. So just reiterating where I got that from.